Hello, hello, Jordan Chariton live. Status Coup, Monday, December the 4th, 2023, right here in the United Corporations of America. The military-industrial complex is alive and well. There is slaughter, genocide, and all sorts of awful things going on in the Middle East. The attack on democracy here in the United States, but not by Republicans, by the Democratic Party. It's not just Republicans and the orange boogeyman who are attacking democracy. It is the Democratic Party, this time in the Sunshine State in Florida. So we're going to get into that. Also, Jen Psaki, the MSNBC's new Rachel Maddow mini-me, she made a comment on her show over the weekend that was so revolting, I had to talk about it today. So we're going to talk about that. Have an interview with an Amazon organizer who was fired, get this, for organizing on his day off after the Staten Island workers Staten Island Amazon workers won their historic union victory last year, which Amazon has still not recognized them or began negotiating a contract. Amazon created a new policy that you cannot organize or do union activity when you're not working, i.e., the main time you would be able to organize. So we'll have that interview, but have special guests today. The crew from Generational Change, Pete Hager, Jen Perelman, joining us from down south. Yes. I'll definitely tell you to do this throughout the show. Give them a subscribe to Generational Change. You'll be live tonight at 7?
Yes, 7 o'clock tonight. Yes. Normally 9, but tonight we are going at 7 because we were accommodating you.
Let me tell you something. Peter Hager doesn't understand having a newborn child. He's like, hey, can you come on for 5 minutes at 10 o'clock at night? Yeah, sure. It's insane. Anyway.
And I probably never will. So forgive me for being ignorant of the whole circumstance.
Here's hoping.
There's a lot of that is a unfortunate thing for humanity if you never are a father. But anyway, please smash that like button. Share this live stream. Got a lot of things to talk about. I didn't put it in the headline, but I want to start with the latest going on in Gaza. At first, Israel told Palestinians to move from the north to the south. They tried to do that, but as they were moving from the north to the south, Israel bombed them and killed them. Not really a great way, or a really foolproof way to travel if you're being bombed in the most densely populated place on earth. Now Israel is telling them to move from the south, which doesn't really make much sense because not, as with everything else, there is nowhere for them to go. But I don't want to say the dam is cracking, but there are U.S. officials now making statements that kind of, sort of are critical of Israel. Not really, but more so than you would expect. Let's first listen to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, who I twisted himself in a pretzel to not really criticize Israel while sort of kind of criticizing Israel. What's that? Oh. Yeah, I decided to send these to Colin 15 minutes before the live stream. So, excuse me.
Oh, he's quick on his feet.
The center of gravity is the civilian population. And if you drive them into the arms of the enemy, you replace a tactical victory with a strategic defeat. So I have repeatedly made clear to Israel's leaders that protecting Palestinian civilians in Gaza is both a moral responsibility and a strategic imperative.
So I take from that, he's saying, which has been an argument I've made, not just about this situation, but how ISIS was created, the fight on terror around the world. There is no eliminating these terrorist groups because you're just regenerating them times 10 by the actions we take.
Oh, yeah.
And as I told my Zionist father when he called me during, after the live stream trying to scold me, there's no like eliminating Hamas. You are literally creating a much worse Hamas, and Israel will deserve it. because I don't know if my home were bombed and my whole neighborhood was leveled and my brother and my children and my loved ones were all killed, I might want revenge. I'm not condoning killing innocent people, but you might be able to, take out some tunnels and some infrastructure, but you're certainly creating more hate towards Israel around the world and likely more terror against Israel by what they are continuing to do. And also reports indicate, as they've killed, I don't really believe the numbers. I think it's well over 20,000 people at this point. They've only really killed, I don't know, like 1,000 Hamas soldiers in Gaza. So by that math, they would need to kill hundreds of thousands of innocent people to take out the estimated 30,000 soldiers in Gaza.
Well, I think that's the plan. I think that was sort of the thought process there. They're being brazen. I don't even think that there's a question as to what they're trying to do here. First of all, they started bombing in the South when this whole thing first started, and they were telling people to evacuate across that border to Egypt. And then they bombed it anyway. So, and they're bombing places that they've already bombed, and we're acting like somehow this is new, and it isn't new. And their intent is to eliminate that population. That's their intent. And this has nothing to do with self-defense. And I think fundamentally the biggest problem, and especially with people probably like your dad, is that they truly see this as like a war. They truly see this is a war, and we were attacked, and we have to fight the evil Hamas and that. Whereas, something I have now come to realize is one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, and it just depends on what side of the wall you're on. But I think that when people don't see this for fundamentally what it is, which is a concentration camp situation, at best like a Warsaw Ghetto situation. So if you would think about those and condemn people for uprising and breaking out and building tunnels and doing all that, I think that, if I were born in a concentration camp, I would be digging tunnels, and I'd probably be wanting to hurt people that are keeping me in a concentration camp.
You also can't murder in excess of 8,000 to 10,000 children and not expect countless terror cells to pop up all over the Middle East. And this is for not just Israel, but also our country, right? Because we are encouraging it. And even when, the Secretary of Defense makes a statement in a very, very cautiously tepid way, suggesting maybe you should stop killing civilians, we're way past that now.
Right.
Way past.
I want to play this other clip. This was kind of another twisted into a pretzel, not to criticize Israel, but criticizing Israel. This was on MSNBC, who's, been rah-rah Israel this whole time, from some type of expert. I don't really know who he is, but I've seen him on TV a bunch. If you could play this, Colin.
To Sky News, the ambassador to the UK insisted that there is at least one safe area.
Israel made sure there is a place for the people of Gaza to have their shelters. There is a place in Gaza called the Muassi. The Muassi is the place where they all can have shelters. Together with international organizations, we created shelters for the Palestinian people. So you cannot say Israel is not, facilitating that. Together with humanitarian aid.
This is where she's talking about, a desolate wasteland of sand dunes next to the Mediterranean Sea. There is no aid in al-Mawazi. There are no aid agency tents. There are no food kitchens. There is no help here.
So, Aaron, is that at all realistic where Israel is telling them to go? Or is this more of a talking point for the Netanyahu government?
This is what I mean when I talk about magical thinking. I've been in Muassi. It's a kilometer wide and maybe 14 kilometers long. It doesn't have any infrastructure. It's completely ill-suited. And it's not able to accommodate all of the Palestinians who, under circumstances, might well go there. It's simply not possible. And I reluctantly have come to the conclusion, I don't think the Israelis are willfully, intentionally trying to kill and murder Palestinians. But I do believe it is simply impossible, given their military strategy, to create a situation where you can move people in advance into secure, habitable locations And I think because of internet shortages, because of confusion, because of the map, which I think it confuses many Israelis, that this is simply not going to be possible. The only way to preserve Palestinian life is for the Israelis to stop attacking densely populated areas, 21,000 humans per square mile in Gaza. And they're not going to do that.
So he's right about one. He's right about one thing.
They're not going
to. Actually, he's not right, because one of the ways to stop this would be ending the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza. But other than that, it's insane that this Israeli spokesperson with a straight face is saying we have offered them shelter in a sinking sand dune with garbage all over it. I mean, that really says everything you need to know.
And she was being like and they're defensive about that. Like, they're being so helpful. How generous of them to give that, even though they're not even if they were doing it, right? Like, even if what she said existed, the complete condescension and disgusting oozy of like supremacy that comes out of her voice, just in the way that she's saying, well, but we gave them this. I don't know. The whole thing is just disgusting.
Be grateful for your scraps, people.
Be grateful that we're giving you a tent in a garbage pit.
Right. But they have been very successful at, and this is where the impact of AIPAC, ADL, DMFI come into play. When you have, the money, when you have the power and you have the influence, it doesn't matter if the people are on your side or not. Ultimately, you're just going to go with whatever the powers that be decide is what is in their best interests. And, there's two rules at play here. One is the genocide, which coupled with the mass migration out of the area because they want an ethno state. And then the other part of it is that there is trillions in natural gas in Gaza. And we have as RFK Jr. likes to say, our outpost in the Middle East. And that's our natural gas, and we want it. So we're going to supply them with all the weapons and funds that they need in order to do their genocide. And when it's all said and done, the pipeline will belong to us. Right. That's it.
Well, there's another thing. I mean, obviously, it's less relevant compared to like the real-time life or death situation there. But I believe what's going on now is really in an already growingly hateful America with political violence, white supremacy. I mean, we saw during the Trump years, anti-Asian hate crimes on the rise. I mean, there was run through the gamut of reasons people hate each other. But there is now, I think, because people are so upset at Israel, rightfully so, I think there is a rise of anti-Semitism. Not really the old school rise, thinking they're vermin or they're not pure, or, the real sick, awful stuff from the 1930s and 40s. But just like, oh, you're a supporter of Israel, so I'm against you. I don't know necessarily if that's anti-Semitism, but I'm seeing in these protests, people are getting upset and angry at Jewish people because they're conflating, I think, Zionism and being Zionism and Judaism. And I think that could lead to violence in America.
Yeah, but I mean, this is very much intentional and has been being done in this country by major propaganda forces. We're talking like Third Reich level propaganda forces since, post World War II. This has been happening here. And it's at a point now, and it's amazing to me because now we have access to the actual real information, but yet people still walk around like they don't know what actually happened. But groups like the ADL and AIPAC have very, very insistently and persistently conflated those two things, conflated Judaism and Zionism by constantly calling people anti-Semitic and constantly playing the anti-Semitic card whenever anybody would dare challenge the state of Israel. And so now we're seeing the consequences of that. And I mean, I spend an inordinate amount of time trying to educate people as the difference between Judaism and Zionism. And I think ultimately, those of us who knew this was where this was going to go, this is what we were afraid of was going to happen.
Even something as simple as informing people that they are telling them to mass migrate out of northern Gaza into southern Gaza. And we told them that the intention of the Israeli armed forces was to commit a genocide and that they were going to destroy all of Gaza. And even though people were insistent that, well, you know, they should just go to Egypt or they should just go to Jordan, it's always the privilege that oozes out of the Jewish affluent class can never be measured in any metric. It's just so over the top and so insufferable and so inhumane in the way that they look at it. But now, at the second that the ceasefire ends, the moment it ends, they start carpet bombing South Gaza. And they have the audacity to get these little trolls to go out there and suggest that it was Hamas that actually attacked first as soon as the ceasefire was over. It's like, look, you can fool some people all of the time. You can fool all of the people some of the time. You can't fool all of the people all of the time. And they are now trying to fool all of the people all of the time on this issue. And it's not going to work. It's just too obvious now.
The other thing is, putting aside the moral depravity of what's going on in Gaza, the leaders of Hamas are not in Gaza. They're in Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. It's the same thing. We went to Afghanistan for, I don't know, 20 years. We pretty much figured out within 6 months bin Laden wasn't in Afghanistan. He was elsewhere. A lot of top al-Qaeda figures were not in Afghanistan. So what are we doing here? I think it's clear because Netanyahu has basically said he wants to annex Gaza. He wants to annex what he calls Judea and Samaria. I don't know internal Israeli politics. It seems that there are, I don't want to say more progressive potential replacements for Netanyahu, but maybe not as, diabolical, psychopathic, maybe a little bit more reasonable to kind of turn this thing around, because the public sentiment in Israel, they want Netanyahu replaced. And I believe Netanyahu and his marriage with the extreme right in Israel, particularly the rabbis and the Orthodox people that he formed a coalition with in order to stay out of jail, that's the reason that he's doing this, to stay out of jail. And because he's basically in a political marriage with God gave us the land fanatics. I'm not saying Israel, if they got rid of Netanyahu, would not disproportionately respond, but I don't necessarily think it would be to this degree. I don't know what the end game here is, but at the end of the day, I don't see Biden or any Democratic Party politician pulling back the financial wallet to Israel over the next year before a U.S. presidential election, because call it what you want, but the reality is some of the top donors in America happen to be Jewish, and that's just the truth.
Yes, but this is a class war. And I wish more and more people would understand that. And if you take the time, again, it can be very tedious, but if you take the time to observe the specific type of Jews who are saying that what Israel is doing is completely benevolent and should be allowed to get away with it, they are very, very much, again, 100% can't say that. But if you look at it consistently, you will see that that particular type of Jewish person is part of the upper class. This is very much a class war. The people who live extremely comfortably, whether it's down here in the Miami Beach area, if it's up in New York, in Manhattan or Brooklyn, again, consistency here. The overwhelming Jewish population in this country is against what's happening in Gaza. But the people with the money and the influence are in favor of it. And because they are in favor of it, they are the ones who get to drive policy, money, and influence. Doesn't mean it's right. And it will, again, I didn't think Biden was going to get reelected prior to October 7th. Now I am definitely sure he won't be. But to the people that are in Washington, D.C., it's not about what is in the best interests of democracy. It's what's in the best interests of corporate special interests. And in this case, the Israeli lobby, which is ADL, DMFI, and AIPAC, specifically AIPAC. That's why they pledged to spend $100 million. That's why we have a state House representative in the state of Florida, Angie Nixon in Jacksonville, who had the audacity to stand up on the House floor in Tallahassee and say that they are committing a genocide in Gaza. Well, guess what? She now has a primary challenger, and she is a very popular incumbent. But who gives a damn? They got all the money in the world, and they're going to come after her and so many others if they speak up. And that's why so many are refusing to get out of line.
I think, like, to answer your question about Netanyahu, I think even if he were to not be the person that was sitting in that office. I don't think anybody would really be that different. And my understanding right now, from polling, is that the majority of Israelis support what Israel is doing, and that they did not support a ceasefire, and that they are. That's my understanding. I am not privy to detailed information, but my understanding is the majority of Israelis are supportive. So even if it wasn't Netanyahu there, you'd have to wonder what else could you.
I believe it depends on the poll, but I believe the overall sentiment is no ceasefire until all the hostages are released.
Right.
Which honestly, good.
I was just going to say that, first of all, they've killed the IDF some of their own hostages. So they're never going to get all their hostages back because they've killed a bunch. But the way that this whole thing has been narrated is wrong from start to finish. Even in terms of what happened on October 7th, I don't believe that narrative. I don't believe a lot of the stuff that's come out. And the whole beginning of this until now, and by beginning, I mean the beginning of what most people think is the beginning. So let's say October 7th. That we're just being completely misled with so much like wrong information that it's just making everybody fight about the completely wrong things. But the majority of people in Israel do support what Israel is doing.
Right. Well, from one insufferable story and corporate funded parties, as Peter mentioned, to another, the Democratic Party has decided to just cancel the primary in the great state of Florida to help Joe Biden, who probably belongs in a nursing home down there. Listen, in 2016, it was, I mean, it was pretty aggressive, but not just openly rigging the whole thing. They tried to do it somewhat behind the scenes. That's what the WikiLeaks emails were all about. It exposed Debbie Wasserman Schultz throwing her whole body on the scale to rig the primary. But now they are not hiding it. And they have literally basically decided that there will be no primary in Florida. And they have removed Dean Phillips, not a fan of, Cenk Uygur, definitely not a fan of, and Marianne Williamson, more of a fan of, removed them from the ballot in the state of Florida. It seems pretty illegal to me. I'm pretty sure on legal grounds, these candidates have a legitimate case to make. But I mean, I have not even seen this really in the Republican Party. Even when Trump was the incumbent, they still technically held primaries. It just, he won, in the Republican primary in 2020. He overwhelmingly won, but they didn't just cancel the cancel votes. Can you explain? Because you guys know, to full degree where the bodies are buried in the Florida Democratic Party. And the Florida Democratic Party, you might ask yourself, how did a guy like Ron DeSantis, who is sinking like the Titanic in this presidential election, how did the Democratic Party lose to this guy originally? I give you the Florida Democratic Party.
Yeah. Well, I would suggest that when we're talking about this election and the canceling of primaries, that's more of a national party problem. I mean, the truth is they're trying to do that everywhere. So wherever they're going to be able to get away with it, and Florida is always going to play ball with that. But, here it's not remotely surprising that that's what happened. Not remotely surprising. And the majority of Democrats in this state won't even put up a fight about it. That's the truth. The majority of Democrats, certainly people that are party people, they're not going to fight about this. They're just going to say, oh, okay. That's just how Florida is. They just fall in line with the Democratic Party.
The problem with the legal situation here is that there was deception that was employed because the candidates had a deadline to meet, which I believe was November 30th. However, this was declared by acclamation, and I've given you a couple of names. I'm not going to, it doesn't matter. No point saying it here. That they declared by acclamation on November 1st. So what they basically did was they did a sleight of hand against not just the people who would choose to, run against Joe Biden, but the people within the party who recognize that the Democratic Party, in terms of integrity, has bigger trust issues than the Republican Party does today.
Oh, yeah.
And so by that measure, you already had catastrophic possibilities as a result of what happened to Bernie in 2016, what has happened over the past 2-3 election cycles, coupled with what has happened in conjunction with the likes of AIPAC, what they did to Andy Levin, what they tried to do to Summer Lee, what they obviously did to Nina Turner, and on we go. Now you're in a very dangerous situation because you have you got two arguments, literally two, and only two, and there is nothing else that could possibly get Democratic voters and even swing left Democratic voters out to the polls next year. You have abortion, which more than likely will be everything that they're going to run on. And then two, saving democracy. We have to save democracy from the Donald.
But is that not ironic that the Democrats are the least Democratic party?
They're infinitely less Democratic than the
especially
Republican
in
Party.
Florida.
At least the Republican Party does hold primaries. And when, for those of you who are saying, well, they didn't really have a primary in 2020, Donald Trump, for all of his flaws, is an exceptionally popular Republican president.
Right. We don't like him, but his party did. So,
he's as popular as Reagan. Like, that's not exaggeration. So he was never going to get bumped out of his party. Joe Biden, on the other hand, is not popular, not even a little bit. His approval ratings are in the 30s.
Right.
Like, at some point, you can't pretend this isn't happening. And so eventually people are just going to kind of wake up to this. But it doesn't make any sense. Like, Florida makes less than no sense because we know how things are down here.
He's not winning here anyway. It wouldn't matter. They should have a prime. Like, I don't see why they care. That's one thing I said. But, because it's not like they're going to have to waste a lot of money here anyway. Correct. So I don't know.
They're going to end up wasting so much more money because the one thing about Dean Phillips, I can't say the same for, what Marianne and Cenk are going to do because they're not, massively flush with cash campaigns, obviously. But Dean Phillips is a corporate Dem. And he's got, Jeff Weaver.
I was going to say, do you know Weaver's working on his campaign?
He's got the.
I saw that
He's got the who's who. He might as well have Steve Schmidt and Rick, Rick Wilson.
I saw that too. It was,
So when you have that, there's no question they're going to challenge this legally, and the Florida Democratic Party is going to end up spending so much more money. What a shock! The Democratic Party in general knows how to waste money.
Oh, here, and they can't. They'll lose it before they can win it. But the problem is they're a private club, and the reality is they don't have to do anything.
But they still should have just allowed it to happen because now you're going to get tied up with so much legal hassle over this.
Problem.
It doesn't make it on its surface. It makes less than no sense. Even if you had a primary in a state like Florida, we know how this is going to go. Biden is still going to get about 70 to 75% of the vote. It made no sense whatsoever.
Right.
So before I play the clips from Marianne Williamson and Cenk Uygur held a joint press conference, reminder, smash that like button, share this live stream. Jen and Peter will be live on their channel at 7 o'clock Eastern time. That's Generational Change. The link is in the description, so definitely subscribe there. They do a great show on a lot of stories other people don't cover, so they're similar to us that way. But Cenk Uygur, who, this isn't about Cenk, but, my thoughts are no secret. He spoke, decided to speak before Marianne, so tells you what he thinks of himself. I don't want to play this whole thing because it's too long, but we'll play a little bit of their press conference about, this undemocratic action.
They gave us no notice, any of the candidates, as to when they would be having a meeting to discuss which candidates could go on the ballot. And I want the press to understand, this is really important, we're in all of the other states. All three of the campaigns are working diligently on getting on the ballots everywhere. So we're aware of the rules of the different states. We're all trying very, very hard to abide by those rules. And I think we're doing a great job. We spend a lot of time and energy in all three of the campaigns trying to make sure that we know when the deadlines are, what the requirements are. There are often signature requirements, financial requirements, forms, etc. And it's basically our number one task because it's one of the bigger challenges in this campaign. And so with all the other states up until now, there's been a relatively fair process. And now we could argue about whether we agree or disagree with the decisions that they've made in regards to who's on the ballot or not. And I would probably have the largest disagreements out of the three of us for sure on getting included or not included in some of the ballots. But this is not about that. And this is definitely not about my naturalized citizen issue. This is about all three of us being excluded in a way that was absurd, ridiculous, counterproductive, done obviously in secret, obviously to help the incumbent Joe Biden, and needs to be reversed. So we have sent in a letter saying that they should include our names in the list that they are giving to the Secretary of State today. We'll, of course, see how that plays out. And we give them every opportunity to do the right thing. And we'd be thrilled if they did the right thing. And we believe in democracy. We believe in letting the Democratic voters decide. And the number one problem with what the Florida Democratic Party is doing is not how it affects me, Marianne, and Dean. It's how it affects the Florida Democratic voters.
Yeah, Jen, the Florida Democratic voters don't care. That's the truth. I know that that's a horrible thing to say, but it's the truth. Nobody here is putting up a fight or a protest. Nobody, like, I get the emails from even the Progressive Caucus, the state Progressive Caucus in the party. Nobody's saying anything about this. Nobody's complaining about it. Nobody cares within the party.
I just want to play Mary. I want to play Mary on it as well. Maybe not surprisingly, she was a little bit, I think, more insightful than Cenk.
I think that the Florida statute itself is unconstitutional, giving that kind of power to the party. The party itself is a political committee. It's not a government agency, but it's playing a quasi-governmental function here, and it has no right to block democracy this way. It has a responsibility to the public good. And we all know that we're living at a time when our democracy itself is in crisis. We all know that the threats to democracy of them that are represented by people such as Donald Trump. But the irony here, of course, is that the Democratic Party claims to be trying to protect democracy, but their way of doing it is to suppress democracy. It's wrong, and it's also undercutting of the most basic rights. If we cannot assume that the people of the United States have fair and equal access to knowing even who their candidates are, then we don't have fair and equal access to the vote. And this is why this is a transgression of the 14th Amendment. And this is what we will be claiming in court if we have to. Both Dean, all of us, Dean and Cenk and myself, are going to take all legal action that we can and that we feel is necessary. We're going to communicate to the public, and we appreciate, I know all three of us appreciate.
So obviously, from your perspective, I understand what you're saying. Florida voters don't care, but I think this is actually bigger than that.
Oh, for sure. Don't get you. I mean, you were asking me about what was it like for the Democrats here, and that's what Jen said.
I don't agree at all with what Jen said, that the Florida voters don't care. I think the Florida voters care. I think the people.
I didn't say the voters didn't care. No, I said the Democrats, like in the party.
The Florida Democratic Party loyalists.
That's what they don't care.
They just go along to get along.
That's what I'm talking about. The people
100%.
that come out and vote in a primary, the primary Dem people do not care.
Hence why somebody like Wasserman Schultz is still in power. Because they don't want any trouble. They don't want to raise any flags. Nope. It's just, well, if this is what they're doing. Now, in private, in quiet, yeah, they'll probably say, this doesn't make us look good.
Right.
But we're not going to do anything about it.
And they certainly won't air that publicly.
Correct.
Right. Well, to me, obviously, one of the things we're going to talk about later is the Dems' brilliant idea to get back the Gen Z voter is Obama. Good luck with that. Oh, yeah. But the Gen Z voter, in my view, based on, just traveling, talking to people and knowing younger voters, I don't really think it's only policy based as why they are fleeing Biden. I think a big part of it is because they decided not to hold a real primary. I think a lot of younger voters have been turned off by the fact that they didn't hold debates, the fact that the media, whether they supported Marianne Williamson or not, the media basically just declared it Biden's, and that's that. We're turned off that media reports and Biden basically declared who were credible candidates and who were not. So all the media reports, labeled, he doesn't have any serious opponents. The first time they said he had a serious opponent was Dean Phillips, a wealthy, empty suit. But Marianne Williamson wasn't serious or credible, RFK, when he was running as a Democrat. So I think a lot of younger voters, shockingly, actually believe in democracy. And if the Democratic Party is just going to openly not hold primaries when it's an incumbent president, which was not the case in the past. When Ted Kennedy challenged Carter, they didn't just declare it over. I think that turns people off. Remember, Cornel West also said one of the main reasons he decided not to run in the Democratic Party, it wasn't only because he's doesn't believe in the Democratic Party is out of step with it, it's because they rigged the primary against Bernie twice. So he said, why would I run in a process that will be rigged against me? So I think this is turning off, maybe not the, every election voter in Florida, but it's turning off a lot more young people nationwide. This is just another drop in the bucket of the Democratic Party screaming, democracy is under attack, Trump, but them having selective standards for democracy on their side.
I mean, you would know that better than I. You're out there talking to more regular voters than I am. But I think that what we've been seeing overall is Gen Z, they're not registering as Democrats for the most part anyway. So you have, I mean, what we're seeing down here, and this is in Florida, but in our county, when they're out registering voters as part of like their little Dem party plan, we're going to go register voters. The majority of voters that they're registering are no party affiliation, followed by GOP, then followed by Democrat. So the majority of young people are registering no party affiliation because I think they already have a bad taste in their mouth about the Democratic Party. I think a lot of the people that are getting involved in voting now have been paying attention since, if not since 2016, since 2018, 2020. And I don't think the Democrats are looking good. So, I think that it's more than just this, but if it's like, one of the final nails in their coffin in terms of the image of the Democratic Party, I would believe that.
And that's the problem. You see, people even somebody like Donald Trump will come and go. But what the Democratic Party is doing right now is it is sowing the seeds of complete and utter destruction of their party infrastructure. They will not get people to give them money anymore. They are going to basically become an exclusively corporate-owned party by Wall Street and Silicon Valley.
I think it is.
Who else is going to give them their money? They already know that the primary is fixed. They already know that they don't care about passing any legislation. Parliamentarian. Where is it? Parliamentary. See, this is your God, ladies and gentlemen. This is who you answer to. You answer to this. They talk about, where is the democratic process? The democratic process has been dead for a long time. It's only because Bernie Sanders mounted such an unbelievable effort in 2016 that all of these little holes that had been there for so long now all of a sudden started getting poked.
Well, we can see it. It's like we see it.
And even at the time, there are people that are in denial of it. But even those normie Dems, you listen to them today and they even say, that's always the excuse. It's not that they think that good, but they try to sell the shit sandwich policies that have been passed under Biden. Biden has been even prior to October 7th, he was bordering on failure. He is a failure of a president. Like, there is no getting around it. And how do I know he's a failure of a president? Because Donald effing Trump, with all of his baggage,
seriously,
is this close to getting back into the White House.
Like, seriously, how bad must Biden be?
Pretty fucking bad.
It's just, this is just the most ridiculous.
And this is what I will say in defense of anybody who is looking at certain players, if you will, in the Florida Democratic Party. Let me assure you, they are 1,000% irrelevant. This comes from the very top in D.C. They are given their marching orders from the DNC, and they take them.
That's the truth.
And that's it.
Well,
and the reason they take them is because I know a lot of them, and for them, this is a career. This is about making money, and if you don't do as you're told, you're only as good as yesterday. It doesn't matter what you've done the last 5, 10, even 20 years. If you get out of line, especially right now, in this particular moment, they'll kick you out and just hire somebody else. Like, it's that simple.
Well, before we move on to our next topic, I want to just do a victory lap because, 6 months ago to a year ago, I had a conversation with you fine folks in Florida, and you told me you thought Ron DeSantis actually could, defeat Trump. And don't underestimate Ron DeSantis. And I said, yeah, wait till he gets in public outside of Florida. It does look like he might be below the Titanic, might be lower than the Titanic now.
Oh, for sure. I will give you that. But I would also say that once he signed the 6-week ban was when I'm like, yeah, he's done. So even if he didn't look like the buffoon and sound like, Alfred E. Newman when he does press conferences, but Yeah, he's definitely blown it big time.
Okay, I just, for my own ego purposes.
No.
needed to
You
get that
were
out.
right.
No, you were
you
right.
were right. But I, as soon as he signed that ban, was like, he's never going to be.
I don't even think it was the ban. I think as soon as he had those cringe smiles in public, especially, oh my God,
for him. He's like,
oh my God, how did his wife deal with this?
His voice is so bad too. I think his voice is very unpresidential to me.
Let me tell you something. The second, and there's
we
a
need
lot,
Morgan Freeman. We need somebody with like a really good voice.
You know what you also learn with these corporate candidates that are flushed with this dirt? I mean, listen, look at what they did to John Fetterman. But if you look at DeSantis in particular, whoever thought it was a good idea to tell him, listen, you're only about 5'8", it's not going to work. You need to elevate your status.
He needs,
and so,
and we don't mean putting lifts in his shoes.
Yeah, like they literally are having him walk around. Even when Bill Maher called him out on his show, he's like, looks like you got yourself some pretty.
Did he really?
Oh, he most certainly did.
I didn't even know that. I was just saying. Yeah. So DeSantis is wearing lifts.
He's wearing lifts.
Unbelievable. Actually, no, very believable.
When you do that, it's just an endless. It's like SNL. Endless joke of
whoever told him it would be a good idea to try and out Trump and do a war on woke with all of his culture war stuff. I guess didn't realize that there is no out Trumping Trump, and the culture war will only bring you so far. It really will. Most Republicans, the main culture war issue they care about is the border and those damn Mexicans. Yeah, they don't like the gays, the trans, all that, but I mean. That's why Trump
border wall. It's true. They care about that is their and pretty much every conversation I've had with somebody that I would consider to be in that camp. If it isn't the first thing, it's the second thing that comes up for them is the illegal immigration. Like that's a very big problem.
Oh, my dad just shared on Facebook and sent it to me. He means well, but he's a Republican and MAGA. Look at all these. Look at the homeless on the streets, but the people in the border the immigrants get put up at the Hilton, and I'm like, no, Dad, they don't.
No, you're getting over razor wire and barrels in the Rio Grande. So
this is a Fox News viewer. Yes.
The only real positive that I can say when it comes to DeSantis or just the GOP in general, if you're really trying to, especially at the state level, like if you're really trying to measure where the difference is between the two parties, and I'm not talking about one side or the other who's worse on the environment or anything like that. But when it comes to emergency relief and execution, the GOP owns the Democrats 10 times over. When they needed to rebuild bridges and different. Now, again, this is also proof that when the government actually wants to do something, they can get it done, which is just shows you how pathetic things really are. But in this state, when something bad happens, they spring into action, the GOP does, and they get shit done. And it's that simple. Whereas with the Democrats, it can literally take a lifetime. Once you get past that issue, though, it's apples and oranges. They don't give a damn about working people. Ron DeSantis doesn't care about working people. No. Nikki Haley would love to basically make Hillary Clinton look like child's play when it comes to foreign policy if she had that opportunity.
Oh my God. Yeah, that one is like, she's like got fangs, that one.
I still believe that the reason why Trump is as popular as he is because he does represent this sort of outside, to whatever degree you want to measure it, this sort of outsider attitude about endless war, the system is rigged, we don't have a living wage, he was against the TPP. Yeah, he's still going to do all of the wonderful tax breaks for his billionaire class buddies. But there is this perception.
That's all.
He's able to sell it. He doesn't mean it, but he's able to sell it.
Best salesman. That's the thing. He's a snake.
But if you're not going to admit, it's kind of like you have the Biden administration and all of the MSNBC, CNBC, Fox Business people trying to sell this economy right now until you have a baseline infrastructure of universal health care, universal education, as well as tuition-free college and trade schools, and of course, a living wage. This economy will never work for regular people, ever.
Right. They don't care.
You just brought up MSNBC, so that's a good segue. This was just fucking revolting. Jen Psaki, who was, and by the way, smash the like button, 230 people watching. Let's get more people watching. About an hour and 15 minutes. check out Jen and Peter. They'll be live on their channel, Generational Change, at 7 o'clock Eastern. Definitely subscribe to their channel. YouTube likes to hide them, like Status Coup.
They sure do.
Go subscribe. Go subscribe. They just interviewed Cornel West, right?
Yes, we did. One of the best we've ever done. Definitely very proud.
I maintained composure. I was very proud of myself. It was not easy, but I did okay.
He was singing our praises, so we felt very
right, and I was trying to not be stupid.
There you go. But Jen Psaki, who I think is like the heir apparent to Rachel Maddow, whenever, like, Rachel Maddow, by the way, went from 5 days a week to 1 day a week on MSNBC and got a big promotion for $30 million a year.
Probably still making at least the same amount of money she was making before.
So no, she's making more at MSNBC to work less. But anyway, Jen Psaki, who is,
do the rich get richer or what?
Yeah. So she was Biden's first press secretary. Now she's got a cushy spot, hosts a weekend show on MSNBC, and I believe hosts the Monday primetime show on MSNBC. But she, like a lot of Democrats, did a segment on how democracy is at stake because of the grave threat of Trump. Let's show that.
Were combative, and they were at times, even when reporters kept pushing and questioning, as was their job. That was democracy working. That is what a free press is supposed to do. And it doesn't exist everywhere in the world. In fact, it's diminishing in the world. So Trump's Truth Social post may have seemed unhinged and crazy and random and like you could ignore it. It was actually, though, a threat to the free press, a threat to democracy. And that threat comes at a time when a record total of 533 journalists are currently detained worldwide. That's according to Reporters Without Borders. A large number of them are being held by the sorts of authoritarian regimes that Trump envisions creating here at home. These are countries being led by his role models, like Russian President Vladimir Putin, who Trump called very savvy and a genius for his actions in Ukraine. In Russia, an American journalist, Evan Gershkovich, has been detained for 249 days simply for doing his job. Trump has also repeatedly praised the leadership style of China's President Xi Jinping. Over 100 journalists are currently detained in China. And over the last couple of years, several foreign journalists from major outlets have been expelled entirely from the country. Putin and Xi are models for Trump. We know that. Leaders who jail and silence journalists, leaders who do not tolerate free speech. That's what Trump is threatening. And if you don't think he's eager to use those tactics, if you don't think he is dying to silence his critics in the media, think again. The Washington Post Jason Rezaian was held hostage for 544 days.
So, Mr. Trump is here. Jen, I feel like she forgot somebody in that segment. A renowned journalist who the Biden administration carried on your pal Trump's prosecution of, Julian Assange.
And this is something I was thinking when she's sitting there talking about that, when you're talking about stifling freedoms and stuff like that, the amount of repercussions for people speaking out against Israel. We're seeing some significant consequences and censorship and a lot of stuff. So, it's just interesting that this is what she's concerned about is, censoring MSNBC, but MSNBC is swill. So,
This is one of the only times in history where I can say I agree with this lady, MSNBC, MSDNC. They are the deplorable people. Do you see that little Jen Psaki? She's such a terrible person. She would give press conferences and talk so badly about me. I'm just an innocent bystander, a total political prisoner. I've been under attack. Nelson Mandela can feel my pain, and he's not even here anymore. Believe me when I tell you, we are going to make America great again in 24. And you know how I know this? Because the second I get back into that White House, we're taking on MSDNC. They know we're coming. They have been after me for the past several years. Well, let me tell you something. You might hit Trump, but Trump hit us back twice as hard.
Well, President Trump, I think they want you back in there. You were gold for them, ratings-wise. You had every boomer in America, liberal boomer in America, glued to Rachel Maddow and the rest of them all day long, every day.
That's because I'm a stable genius. I offer really incredible information that the everyday person can take in and understand like a child. I try to make it as easy to understand as possible. And they appreciate that about me. Don't you think they appreciate that about me?
Oh, yeah.
And unfortunately, those overeducated Harvard snobs, they could never get into Wharton School of Business. Believe me when I tell you, they totally underestimate my ability to reach the people and give them what they're looking for. And that is somebody who will troll the shit out of everyone in power. And I will do that. Believe me. Put me back in power. And if you think I was trolling in 2016, oh my God, you haven't seen anything yet.
So I want to point out, because this is what I was focusing on when she said that. And to be fair, a lot of the things she said about Trump are true. He does love autocrats because I think he wants to be one. However, how could you with a straight face say you care so much about arrested journalists and free press and yada, 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 when you, I mean, whatever, you know, some people don't like Julian Assange for whatever reason, but on the merits, this is one of the most renowned publishers, journalists of our time, and they have literally, they're slowly killing him on bogus charges, so much so that even the New York Times and other establishment rags came out last year or earlier this year on a collective statement saying they need to end this prosecution. Even Mehdi Hassan, who they just canceled on MSNBC, he came out standing up for Julian Assange. Rachel Maddow, I believe, said they should end this prosecution. And I want to show Jen Psaki when she was White House press secretary. Let's see how much she sticks up for the free press when asked by one of the few reporters who gave a damn about Julian Assange.
Free Assange.
You could
also a pardon. And also, what is your response to the message in some quarters that prosecuting Assange is an assault on freedom of speech, freedom of press, information, etc.?
Well, I would again reiterate that this is a case that is still ongoing. It's really under the purview of the Department of Justice. They've put out a statement. I'd point you to that for any further comment. I would say, broadly speaking, outside of this case, that the president has been an advocate for freedom of speech, freedom of press. He's holding a 2-day democracy summit that's wrapping up today. The freedom of media and press is a central component of that. He announced an additional tranche of funding to ensure we're advocating for that. And he is somebody who's going to continue to advocate that domestically and internationally through the course of his presidency. Go ahead, Nadia.
Thank you, Jen. You said you're expecting the price of oil to go down soon.
Outside of this one case with this, you know, minor player who exposed war crimes perpetrated, you know, by Bush in that case, that Biden, you know, supported and the Democratic Party supported. It's just insane. This is not like a little mulligan. They're still doing this. Biden is still doing this. And so much so, this was in October. From The Intercept, a bipartisan duo in Congress has launched a fresh effort to push Biden to drop extradition against Julian Assange. Congressman Jim McGovern and Thomas Massie, no progressive, a Republican from Kentucky, are asking their colleagues in the House to sign on to the letter. It had, I believe, 16 Congress folks. Rashida Tlaib is on there, and I think AOC was on there, including some others. I mean, I want more of a letter, but it's just unbelievable. You can't be serious that you care so much about freedom of the press when you were essentially enacting an act of political revenge. And make clear what they're doing against Julian Assange is because he released the WikiLeaks emails in 2016. Obama, I don't have a lot of great things to say about him, but he did do the right thing and decide we can't legally or constitutionally go after Assange because what he did was no different than the New York Times or other publishers do every day. Biden is doing the bidding of the military-industrial complex, and I think the Clinton wing of the Democratic Party that want Julian Assange to pay for doing anything to take down Queen Hillary, which, of course, none of the WikiLeaks emails had anything to do with why Hillary Clinton lost.
I wouldn't. I don't know if I agree with that, but it's still freedom of information. People had the right to know that the 2016 Democratic primary was rigged. We knew it was rigged. We now have actual confirmation that it was rigged. And the idea that, again, I'm not buying this idea that she lost because she hooked up a server in her house, even though she should have been prosecuted for what she did. But of course, we know that there are rules for, ye, not for thee. And so that, unfortunately, is how it works in the United Corporations of America. But we had every right to know what was in the WikiLeaks emails. We now know that we do not live in a democracy. There is no coming back from that. We are in an oligarch system. And until we're willing to come to terms with that reality, it doesn't matter who we elect. Yes, on the on wedge issues and such, there are issues there, 100%. But in terms of how we're going to be able to survive and thrive as a nation, that's out the window until we address the core problem here.
Right. And I mean, we could go down the list of autocratic things and undemocratic things going on in the United States over the last decade. Oh, yeah. I mean, putting aside that we don't live in a democracy because you have an electoral college, which basically cancels out a democracy, but Occupy Wall Street, freedom of protest, cops came in and ended that as soon as it started getting real momentum. Obviously, what we were talking about in terms of the 2016 primary, and I would say the 2020 primary as well. I don't think that's very democratic when, the candidate you dislike, Bernie Sanders, is on the 5-yard line of winning the whole thing. And the entire party brings out every last vulture out of the woodwork, Obama and the rest of them, to get everyone to drop out. That MSNBC does a fucking pom-poms cheer squad for 3 days between South Carolina and Super Tuesday. They air Biden's events with Pete and Beto. It's rah Biden. New York Times actually estimated that Biden got $70 million of free advertising just over that 3 days between South Carolina and Super Tuesday. No wonder he suddenly is winning all these states he didn't campaign in, because when people were tuning in, all they were seeing was Biden, and, MSNBC and the rest of the party gathering around him. I mean, Ferguson, what they did after the Michael Brown's murder and quashing protesters. Baltimore after Freddie Gray. The police are really just a vessel for the capitalist order and the government to squash democracy. And of course, I mean, in 2014, I believe it was a Princeton study said we don't have a democracy, we're an oligarchy, because over 50% of the time, public opinion is ignored, and the legislation that actually gets enacted is really for elites. So that doesn't negate more advanced threats to democracy, because I do think Trump, he's openly said he wants to use his DOJ to go after his political enemies. I think Trump would definitely try and stay in office. So it's not to say there is no threat with Trump, but let's not pretend these are the guardians of democracy.
Definitely not.
No, I mean, I think that the Democratic Party specifically has proven that it has no interest in actual democracy. I mean, we've seen that repeatedly from them. This is not new at all.
Right. Right. Go ahead.
Okay.
Smash the like button. 1 hour from now, I hope you're subscribed to Generational Change. They'll be live at 7 o'clock Eastern. So definitely subscribe. Their link is in the description. 250 people. So smash that like button. Let's get this going. I want to sneak in one more topic before we air this interview I did with an Amazon worker, because now Amazon, after they lost to workers in Staten Island a year ago, which that union, Amazon, is still not recognizing. They're still not going to the table to bargain, just like Starbucks is still not going to the table to bargain. And what do you know? We have no laws in America to force them, because we live in the United Corporations of America. So even when you win historic union victories, there's no mechanisms to force these companies to follow the law, recognize the union, and negotiate a contract. So we'll have that in a minute. But I wanted to get your take. Apparently, the Democratic Party's brilliant idea to win back the Gen Zers, and I'd say a lot of millennials too, that are moonwalking away from Biden, is to bring Obama out of retirement, get him out there, speeches, rallies, yada, yada. That will help galvanize.
Whoa. Not cancel student debt or the public option? Oh, we can't have that? Okay. No. All right. Just wanted to,
No,
get Obama out
for an appearance. He's just coming out to win. I think that they're, as usual, sorely mistaken as to what people are interested in or like, because when I think of Obama, I think of Gen X. That's my generation and older. It is certainly not the young people that are into Obama. So I don't know who they think they're selling that to, but it just really goes to show you. And we see it here as a micro level. The people running the party really are extremely clueless. They really have no, like, in terms of like connecting with actual humans and what people want, and they're clueless and they don't care. That's the truth. But no, if they think Obama is going to sell Gen Z, I think that they're really delusional.
This article I'm reading from Puck believe in particular Obama could help shore up black voters, because black voters have definitely been, fleeing the Democratic Party too. In the New York Times Siena poll that everybody was freaking out about a couple of weeks ago, Trump had 22% of the black vote. That's by appearances low, but for a Republican, that's pretty damn high. So this article goes into detail. They want to have Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, Wes Moore, Raphael Warnock, Maxwell Frost from Florida, the first Gen Z congressman, whatever, Victor Shee out there campaigning. They're even talking about LeBron James and Taylor Swift to win back.
Can I say one thing? God. This message is to Taylor Swift. Stay the hell out of this. This is free advice.
Be careful. I don't want Travis Kelce to come after you.
Not even that. It's like this could turn on you in a very
honestly, I hope she has a good person.
Yeah.
I hope she has
somebody sensible enough.
I hope she has a good comms person to stay out of this.
Besides Kelce doing big pharma commercials, you really need to stay out of this.
You don't want to get involved. Not smart. I hope who knows? People are really quick to take the buck.
We already know LeBron James, and not even going to say anything.
Yeah, seriously.
Don't.
But whatever. I don't care about all the names on here, but I'm thinking Obama, who's gray-haired, 62, gives professorial lectures all the time. Why would that excite somebody who a month ago just had their student loan payments restarted?
Because when he talks to you, he rolls up his sleeves. See, he's just a regular guy.
Well, and he's black.
And he understands your pain, and he'll even drink the water of Flint, Michigan to ensure you that it's perfectly safe. So
because he's very, very smooth. Obama is smooth, but I still don't see him as appealing to Gen Z. I don't. And none of the people that I know in that age group are like him at all.
The other thing about Obama that you've probably noticed, especially over the last handful of years, is that he has kind of morphed into a Hillary Clinton-like person of, you're going to take your, nasty pill and like it, because if you don't, you're going to get this over there. Yeah, I know I made promises, and I know that I said I was going to do big things, but we have to be realistic. I needed to become rich and powerful, and you just need to suffer for my success. That's it.
Well, also, not that I would trust that they would actually follow through. Biden could make some ironclad pledges to younger voters that if you reelect me, if you reelect a Democratic Congress, House and Senate with enough margins, I will deliver through whatever reconciliation where we don't need Republican votes, a $20 minimum wage. I will,
See, here's the problem with that. Why would anybody believe him? He's already been there for 3 years and he hasn't done these things. So it's like, to me, that might be something you can buy from somebody running who isn't sitting there, but you're not going to buy, nobody's buying that from an incumbent because he's had an opportunity to do so many things and hasn't.
No, I agree with you. My point is they're not even trying with the bullshit of actually promising policy.
I think they know people don't believe it. I
think there's a conflict because they need a lot of donor money flooding in, or the Democratic Party thinks that's what it needs for congressional races, Senate races, governor's races, DNC, and they don't want to promise things that they know the donors won't allow.
Which also speaks to why I think that at least this is their logic that they're thinking, and this is how the Democratic Party has always operated. It's actually one of the biggest black eyes on Wasserman Schultz's reign as the DNC chair.
Who, Peter? Who?
Wasserman Schultz at the head of the DNC for 6 years People should look back on how she spent money back in 2014 during that off-year election. She was spending money at a rate that was almost in parallel to the way you spend money during presidential election years. So when you talk about just like wasting money, the philosophy of the Democratic Party establishment is simply this, much like the canceling of the primary here in Florida. We need all the money for Joe Biden. Like we believe in this pyramid top-down strategy that if Biden does well, everybody else will do well. So we need as much in the financial coffer for President Biden as humanly possible. Forget all these other down ballot races. We need Joe to get that money. Again, it is that DC, fried egg brain that a lot of them have because they're not connected to regular people. They're just not.
I'd like to ask you guys before we bid adieu. I don't know. Maybe I'm just conspiracy minded. I'm not so convinced that a lot of these top folks, including people in Biden's White House, don't want him to lose because the Democratic Party wants a resistance 2.0. There's a lot of money in a resistance 2.0. Imagine the Women's March times 100. You might have, several million people out there across the country. The airport rallies, the fundraising emails that came in, the ratings at MSNBC, the think tanks were busy.
Right.
They might genuinely think Trump would try to end democracy, but as we discussed, I think they have a different definition of democracy than we do. So
they're doing a great job of ending it themselves.
I think that as long as their stock portfolios are doing well, then they don't really care who's in the power position in the White House. I've said that for a long time, that I think people like Nancy Pelosi love it when there's a Republican in the White House, love it when they're in the minority, because all they can do is sit around and fundraise and have an excuse to not do anything. And I've always said that they don't care either. I don't think they care either way. I don't know that there's people necessarily high up in Biden's administration that don't want him to win, but I think that they're totally content with, my money's doing good either way.
I'm also I am not a believer in this idea that if Trump gets back in there, that the Democratic Party is going to have the same success it did in 2017 and 2018 in terms of fundraising. I don't believe that at all. I think too many people can see through the grift now. And once that starts to happen, you lose the millions of people who thought there's always going to be, like the people that we have to deal with down here and the people you have to deal with in New York and New Jersey, and they're all over the place. And we know who they are. They will go down with the ship. It's that simple. But there are enough people who are going to say, how could we have had 4 years to get away from Donald Trump and you let him back in again? And now you want more of my money? Like, why would I give this to you?
I think you're right. I think that definitely they've been riding that gravy train for a really long time. And I think it is coming to an end for them. I do. I agree. I think they're not going to be able to play it as much as they have. I think people now, they had just recently, but you're in charge there now and you just were, and yet you still didn't do anything. I don't know. I think people are catching on to the
This is also, and listen, I don't think enough people are talking, and listen, we love Dr. Cornel West and we hope he catches more momentum as we go forward, but not enough people are talking about RFK. They're just not, and they should be, because he is popular and the numbers are bearing it out. And I don't even know if it's necessarily because he's popular because he's a Kennedy, because he has money, or because people are just so sick and tired of this system, they're willing to take a chance on something else, just like they were willing to take a chance on Trump in 2016. That's why it's so much more.
And we're not like Kennedy supporters.
Yeah, it's so much more about the broken system.
Yeah,
that allows for these opportunities to present itself.
But I think a lot of these same younger voters that might have overlooked Kennedy, a lot of his conspiracy stuff because they liked him on other things. His very much bear hug of Israel might be moving them away.
I agree.
From RFK.
However, there is a take that he has that I think is, I'm not going to say it's Teflon for the general election in terms of his ability to garner that 30 to 35% vote share that he's obviously trying to hit. But the fact that he is the only major candidate right now that is talking about the fact that BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, the mega corporations that run this world, are going to own about 60% of the single family homes in this country by 2030. And if
he could talk about it, he doesn't have a plan for it. If you actually look under the hood, he has no actual.
Right.
He's not proposing anything.
Speaking out to the deep state. He's speaking out against deep state.
Well, again, there is only one plan. The plan is that you actually have to turn capitalism on its head, and you have to actually break up these mega corporations.
And he's not really the one.
I don't see
that's going to be a problem, since he says there's no greater champion of the free market than I.
Of course.
We're not supporters.
But if you are going to talk about where the fall of our society is happening, it's because we have a runaway vulture capitalist system. We have no checks and balances, and these mega corporations that never get any scrutiny, thank goodness, and this is a perfect transition, because while everybody's focusing on the likes of Donald Trump, it's really the likes of Jeff Bezos and Amazon that are burying this country where it stands.
Yeah. Let me read some super chats while I have you find folks here. Nadia Vet Chambers, $5. Many affected minorities don't understand this. They think it's the Dems winning or certain death. Never mind that Dems suck. Correct. Yeah. Tony D, $1.99. Jen, I loved your chat with Dr. West.
Thanks, Tony.
Double K, $49.99. Hey, Jen, Peter, and Colin. Double K. What, am I chopped liver?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. My girl.
Thank you, Double K. Always very generous. Got some other comments. Travers, he hates trans kids but wear high heels. Think you're talking about DeSantis.
Yes.
Very true. Very true. Bebel, DNC with Biden anointing and this Gaza massacre is showing how low they can go. Oh, they could go lower. Yeah. Michael Cooper, not that Jank would have any chance, even if he was natural born citizen or whatever.
Yeah,
I'm happy.
That ridiculousness.
Yeah. I would like Jank to be on every ballot because I think he might actually he might be lower than Lice in terms of popular support.
He's just trying to sell a book. My goodness.
Yeah.
But it's just it's you know what? It's almost as ridiculous as when Elijah did it when he was like 20. He knew he couldn't possibly be right. If you don't qualify, you don't qualify.
Yeah.
So tell people in about 45 minutes, you guys have your show, or 50. I don't know. In less than an hour, you guys will be live at 7 o'clock Eastern. Yes. Definitely subscribe to Generational Change. What's coming up tonight?
We are speaking with a woman that I have been following on Instagram. Her name is Cheryl, and her Instagram account is Why Is That Racist? All one word. And she's just great. And I just really like her. So we reached out. We're having her on. She basically has made it her point as a white woman to help guide other white women, not a la ridiculous, like white fragility nonsense, but like real, this is stuff that we just need to know. Right. And just she does it in a really good way. So I wanted to meet her. So she's going to come on and we're going to talk about some stuff.
We'll also further discuss what's happening with the Florida Democratic Party and why they are basically losing on purpose, as we often like to talk about. And we're, of course, going to cover the fact that this is a genocide, that they are intentionally bombing South Gaza because this was always the intent. Yeah. They told them to go there and now they're bombing there. I'd like to think that the excuses are not going to work on as many people as before, but
it's still the topic.
It is. And we're going to have to recognize that, these problems are going to persist. We're very pleased to announce that we get a lot of great guests on our show, but next Monday we will have Matt Taibbi. He will be coming back. Of course, he had a
nice encounter with our representative.
Had to sit through another tongue lashing from W. Wasserman Schultz.
Oh my God, she's so vile to watch. She's so embarrassing. Like, oh my God, it's just horrible to watch.
We just need to get to a point where we need to recognize that journalism, real journalism, not the shit that Jen Psaki tries to put out there, real journalism is under attack in this country. And that's why we are always so happy to come on with you. Status Coup is what real journalism is all about. There's not a lot of channels out there that are even attempting to cover stories in a very nonpartisan, honest way. And this is of immense importance, especially with everything that's going on right now. We don't really know who to trust. And I even saw a friend suggest, Jordan, that if there is a state to measure in terms of progressivism in the United States right now, it's Michigan. And I'm thinking, this can't be possible. This can't be. They can't
tell your friend my book will be out next year, and he or she will eat his words.
I hope so, and we will make sure to recommend that book to everybody. I don't have a book yet, but maybe
Well,
we'll have one day.
It took a while. It took a while. All right, guys. Thank you. Look forward to your show.
Good to
Bye.
see you, brother.
And don't go anywhere because we have a great interview coming up. It's definitely lost some steam, but remember, almost 2 years ago, Amazon workers in Staten Island were victorious and won the first unionized Amazon in America. Since then, Amazon has continued its union busting and refused to bargain with these workers in Staten Island. There's been a bit of a division, I would say, between the Amazon labor union led by Christian Smalls and some of the original organizers who were with Christian Smalls. They've broken off for reasons that will be explained and created a Amazon Labor Union Reform Caucus. But one of the top organizers that was originally involved with the union campaign, Amazon just fired him for what I believe is illegal reasons. But it's not just about firing him. Amazon concocted a policy that prohibits organizing, prohibits union activity on your days off, meaning you can't organize or try and talk to workers and try to get them interested in the union, try and get them to sign yes cards to sign yes, they're interested in a union. To get a union election, you need to show the National Labor Relations Board that at least 30% of your location is interested in a union. So Amazon basically set a policy that you're not allowed in the building on your days off, meaning you can't organize on your days off. Of course, you can't really organize during your shift because you're working. This should be blatantly illegal, but for reasons we'll discuss, it's not. So here's my interview with Connor Spence. Again, he was an original organizer with the successful union campaign in Staten Island. They just fired him at the end of November for organizing an organizing walkout in October. He's out of work now. We will put the GoFundMe, Colin, I'm sending it to you now. We'll put his GoFundMe in the description if you want to help out. I know he would appreciate that because they just wrongly fired him. So his GoFundMe is in the description. I got to go take care of the babies, so this is the last you'll see of me. But here is my interview with Connor Spence, a now, in my view, illegally fired Amazon worker. Been delighted to be joined by Connor Spence. You are an Amazon worker who was one of the initial workers heavily involved in Amazon Labor Union, who won the historic first Amazon union back in 2022. Even though Amazon has still dragged its feet to recognize you, we'll get to that. But unfortunately, you have now been fired by Amazon over what, according to labor law, seems pretty illegal reasons to me. And they are now firing you in December for organizing you did in October. Can you first kind of explain the most recent, why did they tell you they were firing you, and what are you doing in response?
Sure. So, yeah, I was fired actually Wednesday, November 29th, officially. And the reason given was for violating Amazon's off-duty access policy, which is a policy that says Amazon associates can't be in the building during their off hours when they're not scheduled to work. And access policy is, something that the board has found to be unlawful. It's something that we've had a lot of fights with Amazon about, because it generally boils down to workers just having access to their coworkers to have conversations, to be able to communicate a pro-union message. I was terminated for that policy in connection with alleged off-duty access violations that were part of our Prime Week walkout that we did in October. In around October 11th, I think. And so the organizing I did to lead that walkout and help put it together, that's what Amazon ended up terminating me for.
So in English, Amazon created a policy, I believe, after you guys won the union, that you cannot come to the building and organize for union activity on days you're not working.
Basically, yeah.
So are they basically saying you are not, you're only protected in the union on days you're working, but on days you're not, you can't come to the building, you can't talk to union members, you can't pass out pamphlets, which seems odd because obviously during the over a year-long union campaign, you and others organized in the building, outside the building, on plenty of days you were not working.
Yeah. So, and it's especially egregious at JFK because we won the election. The workers at JFK are represented by a union. So there's really no basis to bar union representatives or union organizers from having access to the, but I also work there. So there's no real reason why I should be able to talk to my coworkers and have the same access to them that Amazon has. Amazon can do meetings, they can send out emails and text messages completely unfettered. But if you're a union organizer, talking to coworkers about the union is essentially a fireable offense.
And you said the board finds this illegal. You're talking about the National Labor Relations Board?
Yes. So there's actually a very kind of confusing history with this policy. It was in place before the JFK election, but it was being enforced discriminately against the ALU organizers at that time. It was something that if you asked an Amazon employee about this policy, they'd probably be surprised that it even existed because it's never enforced. And it's part of the Amazon workers' normal routine to go to the building when they're not scheduled to work, to talk to HR, to talk to their manager. If they take public transportation and it's raining, you miss the bus, you can wait in the break room for as long as you want, of course. But yeah, originally the board had found merit to our charges that it was being applied discriminately, and Amazon settled. And so during the JFK election in 2022, from January to March, when the election period was, we had full access to the break rooms. There's a big component as to why we won, because we were able to engage with our coworkers. Part of the settlement
on days you were working and not working.
And not working, yeah. We did essentially what was an occupation of the break room. So we were there. We had consistent presence almost 24/7 during that time. Part of the settlement was that Amazon had to send out a notice to all over 1 million employees affirming that they had a right to organize. And it ended up being the largest NLRB settlement in US history. And that was a joint settlement between the Amazon organizers in New York and some organizers with Amazonians United in Chicago. Part of the settlement as well was that they could bring the policy back after 90 days, but they had to apply it non-discriminately. And so now we're in the case where the board has now rethought that position, and they think, number one, the policy is unlawful on its face. Just having a policy that says workers can't have access to the building in non-working areas on their off time, without a valid business reason, which Amazon doesn't have. But also, it has once again been enforced discriminately towards union organizers, not just myself and my coworkers at JFK in New York, but also now they're bringing back this case against Amazon. It's not just New York and Chicago. It includes the workers from Bessemer, includes workers from all over the country. There was an issue recently in Kentucky with the organizer KCVG where they were given final write-ups, 11 of their organizers, for just taking outside the building. So the access issue, it's not only are they saying you can't be inside the building, now they're being even more aggressive, saying you can't even be outside.
Mm-hmm. And it also logistically doesn't make sense because obviously you guys won, but for other warehouses that want to unionize, you can't really organize during your work hours. You're working. Yeah. So common sense, the main time you would organize is after work, your days off, which they're obviously making or trying to make prohibited to stop organizing. So on its face, it doesn't make sense. So you were fired in late November for what happened in October. Any thoughts or inside information on why they waited a month? Because you were a key figure, in the first year, organizing with Christian Smalls and others. Obviously, they know who you are. And over the recent year, you've broken away from ALU, the main union. You're now with the Reform Caucus. But why would Amazon wait a month to retroactively fire you?
Well, this isn't the first time they've done this. This is kind of what their playbook is. This is the third time I've been placed on suspension for this exact policy. The first time back in October of 2022, there was a fire in our warehouse. The fire department came, the fire was put out, but the working conditions of the warehouse were still unsafe. It was very smoky. Half the building was flooded. Workers didn't want to go back to work. So we had organized a work stoppage. And the organizers that were there, myself, Brett Daniels, others, we were all there off duty facilitating this collective action, and we were all suspended for 5 weeks afterwards for violations, alleged violation of this off-duty access policy. The second time happened again in the summer of this year, once again suspended for 5 weeks. When I got back, I was given a final written warning. And then this time again, in connection with the walkout, suspended for another 5 weeks. So that's just, I guess, how they approach this. They first place you on a suspension to investigate, but I think really the obvious reason is to get you out of the building, as will prevent you from organizing even more. We had a follow-up walkout that was planned at the end of this month and still is. So yeah, it's, I guess maybe they got approval from the lawyers this time that they were willing to take the most drastic step and terminate me.
And I know the National Labor Relations Board is understaffed, under-resourced, all that. They have done some good things over the last few years, but like we said, this does seem pretty black and white and illegal on its face. So why did your suspension stand, or were they reversed with back pay? And what is the National Labor Relations Board waiting for if they could just rule that this is not a legal policy and reinstate you and protect other workers from the same thing?
Yeah, I ended up getting paid for my suspensions, and I got disciplinary feedback. I got write-ups, but when it comes to the board, yeah, they're understaffed. The law is pretty weak in some areas. It's difficult for them to really take action until somebody is terminated. Then that is something that in their eyes threatens the bargaining process, creates a chilling effect amongst the workers, really interferes with organizing in a way that does irreparable damage. So I think, it could be an opportunity now that I am fired for this. Maybe it gives them, ammunition to really go after Amazon in the courts and try to get me my job back. And we requested 10J relief, which is essentially requesting the board to go to court to seek an injunction to get me back to work, or in this case, any worker who was fired wrongfully back to work, without waiting for the court process to work itself out, because sometimes that takes years.
Mm-hmm. So that's a request that's in, and you're just waiting for a ruling on that?
Yeah, we're waiting for the board to respond to our request.
And bigger picture, obviously there's a lot of other things going on in the news, but in April of next year, that'll be 2 years since the ALU in Staten Island won the historic union victory. Amazon has still not come to the bargaining table. Is there no enforcement mechanism from the NLRB, or is it just, this is Amazon, they're $1 trillion behemoth, and they're just going to delay, and there's really no entity that's going to make them bargain with you?
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem with labor law in the US. There's a lot of opportunities for corporations as rich as Amazon to drag out the process as much as possible. And the board, they do what they can. The board is very slow. They have issued a complaint against Amazon for refusing to bargain with ALU. We won the election. We were certified as the representative of the workers at JFK 8. There's no legal basis for Amazon to refuse to bargain, but essentially also there's no penalty for them doing it. The reality is that you can't rely on the NLRB or on labor lawyers to get a strong union contract. It has to come from the workers. It has to be a thing about organizing collective action. And so if we really want to get a contract from Amazon, let alone a strong contract, workers are going to have to organize to go on strike, and maybe not just in JFK 8, but in warehouses all over.
And let's talk about that for viewers who don't know the history. Again, you were with the ALU in the beginning. You, Christian Smalls, Derek Palmer, Brett Daniels, many others. But over the last recent year or so, you kind of broke apart from ALU president Christian Smalls, you and what would you say, like 40 to 50 other original ALU organizers. So you kind of have split off into the ALU Reform Caucus. I did reach out to Christian about your firing. He said ALU's position is that the no access policy that we're talking about on your days off that Amazon used is union busting and is the reason we're going to go to court against them with a national suit. So ALU, even though you're kind of in the reform caucus is against this, but why isn't there, larger strike action going on at JFK 8? It's a massive warehouse. We're talking 7,000, 8,000 workers, so it's not easy. But if you want a union victory and they're dragging their feet, why is there no strike action? And obviously, things have slowed down. I know that there's been organizing efforts in Kentucky, North Carolina, but overall, we're not seeing, what we were hoping for, which is organizing efforts all over the country.
Yeah, and I think like the access policy is relevant to all this because it's in big part the reason why you haven't seen a success like JFK be replicated since we won. But there is, I guess, a difference of philosophy here. The Reform Caucus, we believe very strongly in collective action as a mechanism to place pressure on the company, workplace improvements, get a strong contract. Because like even if the board tomorrow, Amazon to come to the table and negotiate, if we're not organized, if we can't organize a strike or a walkout or anything like that, there's essentially no way to get them to make any concessions and give us a good contract. So then what was the point of all of it? As far as ALU and Chris and his philosophy, it seems to be a very legalistic, just let the NLRB handle it, let the lawyers handle it. He said in the press that he thinks strike is counterintuitive and that it plays into the company's hands, and we don't really understand why that could be. So one of the kind of positions of our Reform Caucus and our platform is to reform ALU to take on Amazon in a way that is adopting a winning strategy and organizing the workers to be more radical, more militant, and not be afraid to take on the company and not just take a servicing approach where it's, exchanging grievances for dues or whatever, but actually creating a union that is the collective experience of Amazon workers fighting together and taking on the company.
Yeah, because my understanding is the Staten Island warehouse and why they union busted so hard is it's one of Amazon's most important warehouses. It services New York City, the tri-state area. So it's one of their most profitable warehouses in terms of, where things go. So if there was a strike, that could really, really hurt Amazon, considering the importance of JFK 8.
Yeah, JFK is one of the highest volume buildings in the network. It is certainly a choke point in the network. If work wasn't able to move in or out of JFK 8, that would have a huge impact on Amazon's supply chain. Customers might not get their packages, and Amazon knows that. And so they know how valuable JFK 8 is as a strategic point in their network and why they deployed so many resources union busting against us, even though at the same time they saw us as amateurs with no experience.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, I obviously expect to know the answer, but I assume the working conditions have not improved at all since your union victory, and not just in JFK 8, but from other warehouses you're speaking with, which is probably, part of why they want to organize.
Yeah, I mean, the conditions have largely remained the same. There's been no improvements. We haven't really gotten any real adjustments to our pay in years. In 2022, at the end of the year, JFK got a 25-cent raise as a cost of living adjustment. This year, we got $1. So the problem is that now we're making well below in New York what would be considered a living wage in New York, which at the very least would be, according to the MIT living wage calculator, around $25, $26 an hour. The base wage for Amazon workers around $19 an hour. A quarter of our workers in JFK are seasonal, and they get even lower pay. They get no benefits. They don't even have any kind of guarantee that they'll have a job at the end of their seasonal assignment. And Amazon knows they can get away with that because they know people are so desperate for to have any kind of employment now. It's really their market to do with what they please.
And for you personally, what are you doing to kind of scrape by? Because obviously you live in New York or Jersey, wherever you live, and it's extremely expensive. And now you don't have a paycheck. You might win and get back pay, but that doesn't really help now.
Yeah, and I not really holding my breath, waiting for the board to do anything because I know how long that can take sometimes. But I think Amazon knows eventually they're going to lose on this issue, but I think they see the success that we're having, creating walkouts, organizing workers, and they would rather block our momentum and chill the organizing in the short term and, you know, lose in court later, but they still would have tried to slow us down. I just think that they're not going to slow us down. And yeah, I want this to be an opportunity for us. If I'm fired, that just gives me more time to organize from outside the workplace and travel to Kentucky, help share my experience with them, talk to other Amazon workers across the country. So I have a GoFundMe up. It's helping me cover my expenses to a degree, and then anything else extra just goes back into the organizing that we do for the caucus. So that's how I'm scraping by in the meantime.
I will put that under the video, so if people want to contribute, which they should, because honestly, there's a lot of shit going on in the Middle East and elsewhere. It's hard to keep up, you know, but remember how excited people were, you know, almost 2 years ago when they won. But as I said then, I didn't want to be a Debbie Downer, but that's kind of like half the battle. Now it's the war of getting this company to come to the table. And clearly the governmental structure we have, there doesn't seem to be a mechanism to force them to the table. Same thing with Starbucks, by the way. They're not coming to the table either, even though, you know, at this point, hundreds of coffee shops have unionized. So as I call it the United Corporations for a reason. But it's vitally important, I think you would agree, for them to come to the table, because look what just happened with the UAW. I mean, they fought their fight originally, you know, 50, 60 years ago, but they would have never been able to win unless they were, you know, a recognized union that had, you know, leverage, which was their labor. And I think the same thing could happen with Amazon. Amazon, you know, for all of Bezos and, you know, the adoring media, if there was a strike, a walkout at one plant, I think that could be kind of contagious and spread to other places. But like you said, you need to actually be organized.
Yeah, we've seen success from the Teamsters and their UPS contract fight, building militancy in their workforce and threatening a strike. UAW definitely. And yeah, our philosophy is that's the only way to take on Amazon as well. And when you add militancy and radical energy in the working class, it translates into other areas. It helps us take on our government in other ways related to our policy in the Middle East as well.
Absolutely. All right, man. I appreciate it. Again, we'll have the GoFundMe in the